This is The Storied Outdoors, a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark, finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us.
Welcome to The Storied Outdoors. My name is Brian, and I am joined, as always, by my best friend and co-host, Brad Hill. Today, we are joined by artist and illustrator Breezy Brookshire. Breezy is an Indiana native and enjoys all things books and nature and is self-proclaimed hobbit-ish.
Hobbit-ish. I like that.
Brad and I met Breezy in 2019 at Hutchmoot in Franklin, Tennessee, and fell in love with her art and illustrations. She has illustrated the likes of Audrey Bunny, A Little More Beautiful, and most recently, she illustrated a book in collaboration with our friends Ken and Shay at Wolfbane Books entitled The King of All Things. Breezy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to finally get to sit down with you guys.
I feel like it's a long time coming. We've talked about it for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, we have like a list of people that we would like to have talked to for the podcast, and you've been on it for a while, and now the time has come.
It's happening.
The stars
really
have aligned.
happening.
I mean, the stars literally are aligning. So
That they are.
For better or for worse.
We were blessed to have Ken and Shay last season, and really enjoyed talking to those guys, and really have enjoyed their books and their storytelling.
Man, aren't they solid? I love their vision for Wolfbane and what they're doing.
Yeah, they really are. We said they're our people. We hung out with them at Hutchmoot this past time. We're like, they're our people.
Oh, good. Good.
Whenever I sat in, Brian and I were talking earlier about the breakout session that you taught. We sat in on that, and I remember, hearing you talk about your art, and there's a whole another conversation, or maybe a question later that we'll talk about when it comes to that breakout session. But just as an art man, I was sitting there as a dad who has a daughter who's she really is gifted. I'm not just being like a dad. It's like my daughter's like really gifted, but man, objectively, she's very talented. And so I want to do whatever I can do to, invest in that and to, encourage her in that. What was that spark that sort of ignited that passion for illustration and art for you?
That's a good question. I've always loved to draw. And from the time I was like really, really little, I loved to draw and was always looking for paper. But sometimes like we would just sit around the table and my dad would doodle. He did a lot of drawing when he was younger. And so he had like a few different doodles that he kind of had down pat and would go through with us when we were really little. We'd, sit at the table after dinner and play around with those. And he had like a silly face that he would do. And then there was just always plenty of paper and lots of books. We went to the library a lot growing up. I think it was once we started homeschooling, it was a weekly thing. And then eventually, as I got a bit older, I was like, I love to draw. I love cartooning. I think I want to be a cartoonist. And then that eventually evolved into children's book illustrating because the fairy tale section kept grabbing me.
Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I guess the follow-up question to that is like, what's some of your encouragement for a young artist that I can maybe relay to her, or if she listens to this? I don't know if she listens to Dad's podcast or not, but if she were to listen to this, what are some words that you would tell a young artist?
Yeah, I would say number one, get a sketchbook. Loose paper is fine, but once you start really making a habit of it, if you have a collection of your art, you can see throughout the entire book and see it. You can see the progress, so you can start to see themes of what you enjoy drawing and making a regular habit of it. Get a good set of drawing pencils. They don't have to be super expensive. You can get like really cheap ones. I actually prefer the texture of the cheaper ones sometimes, and have a little pouch with your little drawing utensils in there and just carry it with you wherever you go. Like if you see an interesting face, if you see some flowers, just practice incorporating that into your life on a regular basis with a sketchbook for sure.
That's good. I love that.
I think, what was it, Andrew Peterson that said, they just magically appeared around the house, these sketchbooks, that he would. And you got Aiden just making amazing art and all his children are also talented. So
they're so creative. Yeah.
What a great thing to kind of track your progress. I'd never thought about that and the value of a sketchbook. So that's
good.
cool.
Yeah. And hopefully you keep getting more and more sketchbooks, and then they start to pile up and you start to see even more of it. Yeah.
That's cool.
It's a good place to start.
Breezy, whenever we met, I have to admit that I was so ignorant and I had not put a face with the name. My daughter loved the Audrey Bunny, the book. You know, at the time she was like 2.5 years old at the Hutchmoot when we met in 2019, and so like I remember us going to your session and you talking about it and saying you're an illustrator, and I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to write a children's book one day. And then like I go up to you at dinner and I'm like, so like, could you like illustrate my book or something like that if I were to ever write one? And you're like, well, yeah, you were trying to be so nice, and like you're probably thinking, what is this Dumbo doing? Just asking me to illustrate a book he hasn't written yet.
Honestly, it depends so much on so many factors.
And I'm like, I don't even have a children's book that I'm writing, and I'm just like, I just thought it'd be cool, and like,
I don't know if you know this, but Breezy's kind of a big
she's
deal.
kind of a big deal. And so like,
it is in a very small group of people.
Fast forward like 24 hours, and we're standing there in the little library that they have at Hutchmoot, and I'm looking at the shelf, and like Breezy's standing beside me, and I'm literally holding Audrey Bunny in my hand. I'm like, oh, my daughter loves this book. And I look at the illustrator. I'm like, wait, Breezy, what? Wait, what? Did you write this? I mean, did you illustrate this? And so I felt so stupid.
Oh.
But then
it takes a while for things to
I quickly have gotten to where we absolutely love your art. I've bought anything that has a bunny on it, I think. The little dad bunny in the chair with a kid reading to the kids. I've got I've got a bunny smoking a pipe, and one sitting at his typewriter. You know,
I forgot about that one. I love that one.
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite. Yeah. So
yeah, those are little COVID projects.
Yeah, those are COVID projects. I like look forward to, like, you would release these things like on a Friday or something. I'm like, oh, here we go. What are we gonna get tonight? And so
I should do that again. It was fun. The adrenaline.
Oh yeah.
Quick little watercolors, or selling little watercolors very quickly.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah, like you said, we're saying how you're a big deal and you're like in a small group. It made me think about Andrew talking about he's famish.
Famish, yes.
Famish. I appreciate that.
Yes, if I'm at a homeschool conference, someone will recognize me.
Oh, that's funny.
You said something, Breezy, that sparked my interest or made me think of something when you're talking about when you look at things, you know, and you're seeing things that you would draw.
Mm-hmm.
How, like, when you're on a walk outside, how does that change the way you view the world around you as an artist?
Oh, I love that. Well, number one, I just adore tree leaves. And so I'm always looking for trees. I'm like automatically glued to the trees. And I love just seeing how they kind of hang like groups of hands. And I think there's a name for it, but I just love seeing the shapes of leaves, how they fall, how the wind moves them. Even like there could be like a slight ripple along the edge of a leaf, and it has this extremely organic quality to it. And I love it's almost like they were drawn in a sketchy way. And so when I draw, I've like sketching was my first love, and I think I'll always love it. And I'm going through a bit of burnout right now, and I feel like that might be the ticket for me to help like kind of ease back into it, because it's just so restorative when you're out in nature, and like the outlines of everything. I don't know. It's just very profound. The colors obviously are great, but like being able to translate all of those textures and the movement and getting to see, that's another thing too, the movement or the direction that things are going. If you've got like a variety of trees in a group, you've got some of the spruce or the junipers that are kind of like pointing up over here, and you've got maple trees that are just kind of like falling over themselves over there, and then you've got the oak trees that are just kind of spreading their arms out, and then they kind of fall, and then palm trees. I don't believe palm trees are trees. They're not trees. And I don't have them in Indiana, so I don't care about those. Just so y'all know how I feel
you're
about
not a real tree, palm
but they're
tree.
doing their own
no,
thing
it's in
too.
your name.
You're just a long pineapple.
So yeah, just like every plant has like kind of their own body language. And I think that's kind of what I look for first and what I just kind of forgot that I intuitively pick up on. So thanks for asking.
Mm.
Man, I love that. I love talking to artists because of the way that they see the world. It's a different way than people who don't have that artistic side. And I just love it because it's fascinating and it brings a whole nother dimension, and it helps me it kind of challenges me to think about things a little bit differently. Um, so you talked about sketching, but you've also got this illustration side of you. When did you make the jump from just like artist in general, like someone who sketch and paint, to being someone who can illustrate? Because I feel like those are
Yeah.
two very different skill sets. And
Yes, they are. It was a journey for sure. Um, I think I think I was probably getting close to graduating high school. I was starting to get a pretty good idea that that's what I wanted to do. I might have even illustrated a small book by that point, but getting to it professionally, I had started putting a lot of my artwork on a blog back when Blogspot was, the main social media at the time. And my sister and I had a joint blog, and we would take turns posting, and I was always posting art. And then Pinterest was new, and somehow my art ended up on Pinterest. And there probably weren't a ton of, I mean, there were a lot of artists on there already, but some author had a friend and who was also an author, and they were like, "Hey, look at this girl, check this out." And the one author just fell in love with my stuff and begged her publisher to give me a chance. That's actually who I'm staying with right now.
oh, that's
While I'm
cool.
here in Franklin
Cool.
on sabbatical. So God, yeah, just provides in really cool ways, and everything's full circle. So um yeah, so she begged her publisher to check out my portfolio, which was pretty small at the time, but I guess it had the right variety that they would look for. And I hadn't done anything quite that big yet. So I think I was 2021 when we first started talking and made the jump into
Wow.
kind of full-time illustrating.
Wow. And do you still prefer the sketching, the nature pictures, the little woodland creatures? What do you, or do you like the books that combine both of them?
Yeah, I most of the books I've done incorporate nature in a big way usually. I think I love faces. Faces are super challenging.
Yeah.
Um, and I like drawing kids. I haven't drawn as many adults in children's books as much as I'd like to. Maybe I'll focus on that a little bit more next. Maybe more of like a people-oriented story would be fun. So I love drawing kids with a huge nature component, and anywhere I can fit trees in. Yeah, yeah. And then, so sometimes sketching is, I mean, it always starts with sketching, and then I can put paint on top of that typically. But yeah, I like it when I can stay loose enough and it looks like a sketch, and then I can add color without it getting muddy. There's
Mm.
a delicate balance there, but yeah, it always starts with sketching 100%.
Yeah. So you talk about that. Can you talk about that maybe a little more and get into maybe a little bit of a detail? And you go from this sketch to do you sketch out like the whole story? Do you choose like
Mm,
you read the story and
yeah, good question.
you pick a couple of sections? You're like, oh, this is the one I'll illustrate for this page and this page, or so. How does that work? I'm just super
Yeah, it's
curious
kind
about
of
that.
honestly a little bit of all of that. Once I get a manuscript, I'll read it, and then I'm kind of looking for, I don't want to read, like, I don't want to overanalyze it, but I want to be able to like connect with it on an emotional level the first time
Sure.
I read it. And sometimes I'll see things pretty once in a while I'll see things pretty vividly, and I'll even make a quick sketch on the paper if I've printed it off. I'll make a little doodle. And then I'll read it a couple more times with a sketchbook and make a few more doodles that are pretty loose. But by that time, like, I kind of know what I want the characters to look like, or I have a pretty good feel of what I'm getting from the story, or
Mm,
what will come out naturally. So I'll play around with
yeah.
that, do some like character design, and then fill in any of the gaps of the story that wasn't visually making sense just yet. Sometimes it just takes some working out, trying some different angles and stuff. And so I'll build up the thumbnails for a while. That process can take a few weeks actually, because it's a lot of mental work. And then from
Yeah.
there, yeah, then I'll do more detailed drawings, and then I'll move to watercolor paper. And so through that process, I try to keep it as short of a process so that I don't lose some of the steam or the liveliness of the drawings, and try to get some like really good. I don't know. See, working with watercolor paper is kind of tricky. Trying to get that sketchy quality onto rough paper, but eventually it makes it. It comes through. And eventually, I'm happy with it, and it gets painted, and then there's a scanning process, and then there's the reviewing process, and everyone's looking over the details and discussing it, and make sure the text is in the right place and the coloring of the pages are correct and everything.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
so interesting. Is that something that, when you create sort of a character from nothing, right? The author's written it, but they haven't visualized it yet. Is that something you
Sometimes,
send
yeah.
to the author and you're like, hey, what do you think about this rendering of this character?
Yeah, sometimes they'll add notes, like either their publisher or they themselves will be like, "Hey, I imagine her with like really curly hair," or "I'd like the mom to have,
That's so
you
neat.
know, this complexion," or "It's based on this person, so I'd like to see this feature," or whatever. Um, and so then sometimes I wouldn't have imagined that at first, and then I incorporate it, or I'll let it flex a little bit and show them some options.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So
that
fascinating.
getting to see behind the scenes of this is just fascinating to me. I love one of the things that Brad and I started out this podcast, and one of the things we wanted to really accomplish is to literally just kind of put some good into the world. Some not get too political, not get too right or left, and just really from a Christian perspective, and putting something into the world, art, story, um, finding interesting people. We feel like we've tried to accomplish that, but that's almost I feel like that's what the artist calling is putting something good into the world,
Mm.
and I don't know if I'm accurate on that, but I sure do. It sure does put a lot of good into my life when I'm looking at these beautiful paintings and drawings. And we've had several artists on here before, and I can't get enough of it.
Mhm.
What is what is your journey, I guess, and kind of your driving force behind your art?
Mm. That's a big and very good question. I think kind of backing up a little bit, like going going to art galleries and stuff, especially with current art. I feel like there's so many people who aren't intentionally putting good into the world. Like they want to say something, and they want to create art, and they can be very, very creative. But it's so emotionally heavy sometimes going to galleries, and
Mm,
it's not always enjoyable. And I'm like, I'm an artist. I don't even like I don't
mm,
even like this. Which is probably why I'm more drawn to narrative forms of art, because you've got an author with a story who probably has something to say, and if it's for children, it's typically going to be constructive. And I've also been super blessed to encounter a lot of similar music too, and probably some of that's through the rabbit room for sure. But like
mhm,
um, you've got you've got artists, and you've got these very sensitive souls who love beauty and truth and goodness very deeply, and that's married to this drive to say something about it or respond to it in some way, or create
Yeah.
some goodness of their own, in a creating more beauty, adding to the beauty. And so I've really, really grown in this idea of like my art kind of reflecting a place. And a lot of people have told me, and I don't know if I would have thought of this on my own. I think I've felt it subconsciously, but a lot of people have said, it's like your art and your characters are all coming from this place, and I want to live there. And I was like, Yeah, me too. I do. And I think so much of that is, I think I used to say it was me wanting to point people toward heaven and our ultimate home being with God. And now I'm like, that's even more true now. How did I even know what I was saying back then?
Mhm.
It's like it's
Mm.
even more true. I feel like I'm finally telling the truth. But that's also just kind of the process of self-discovery and getting closer to embodying truth. But there's also very much loving home and loving places, and I've most places I've lived for a very long time or have had a chance to get a very deep connection with
Mm.
an old house, a piece of property that's, either surrounded by fields or woods, and I could sit by a window and just watch the seasons go by, and that was a huge part of my inspiration for a long time.
Oh
So
man.
now that I'm not in as permanent a situation, I'm able to find nooks and crannies of places to work and live in. But I'm starting to kind of loosen my grip on that because home as an inspiration is such a poignant, deep thing, and I love creating homey spaces. Um, but I'm also learning to kind of be freed up a little bit, and that's been a fun process too. So I guess ultimately, I'm very, very delighted by the beauty and innocence of a lot of things, and innocence in a way that there's like this timeless quality to. I mean, you think of like I one of my inspirations is kind of this idea of a medieval apothecary garden in a cloister. I went to the Met's cloisters place out in New York City several years ago, and it was one of the most impactful
Mm.
things ever. And it's just one of those places. There's just such like ancient beauty there, and you just feel so grounded. I'm like, I want kids to be able to, and even adults too, to get to have little whispers of that beauty, and later on be able to pick up on it and go, oh my goodness, like this is deep and meaningful, and this isn't just a fad. It's beautiful because it echoes other
Mm.
deeper, truer things that have been around for even longer. So
Oh, that's
hopefully that
good.
kind of answers the question.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Huh. Yeah. Those are certainly the places that you want to sit and be for a while.
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you, Google.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think
Sorry
back
about
to
that.
that that session that you did at Hutchmoot, and I think of the topic was about grief, and I think
Mm.
you had just I think you said that you had just it'd been about 3 years since you'd lost your father, and at the same time, within the last year or two of that time, we met you. Brad and I had lost our father, my dad and his dad, and it just what you had to say was just so impactful, and I think there was not a dry eye in the room. But just we've talked a lot about grief on this show, and and kind of our own personal journeys with that, and is can you tell us a little bit about your journey with grief, and maybe has art had something to do with that, or is there a journey that art has taken also?
Yeah, they're kind of woven together, and I think a lot of my creativity has kind of ebbed and flowed with the emotional experience of that, of course. And sometimes it's been honestly, there have been several moments where I have found a lot of comfort in art, and I kind of forget this
Mm.
sometimes, but there have been moments where I've just had, those tumultuous feelings of just overwhelm or darkness, or just is the word malaise, that kind of like blah feeling of like,
Mm,
I guess this is how life is now.
yeah.
Oh,
And
oh, I feel that.
deciding to just sit down and create something, and it's not even like I am going to create something beautiful. It's almost like, not to be cheesy, but like a form of self-care where you're like, you know what, I just need beauty in my life. I'm desperate. I'm going to light this candle. I'm going to sit down with this paper because I love the texture and I kind of miss how the pencil feels on the paper. And I'm
Mm.
going to push it around the paper until something happens, and then you just, the muscle memory starts to kick in and it kind of carries you through a little bit. So there have been a lot of moments of that. um but yeah, it was a really, really hard time. There were 4 weeks between my dad's lung cancer diagnosis and his passing, and
Mm.
we had hospice for him like the week before he passed, and even then it was only to get oxygen for him because the doctor didn't think his levels were low enough, etc. So like by the time we got it, we needed hospice desperately. It was just happening so fast.
Wow.
But there was a moment where he was sleeping a lot, and this is, I haven't thought about this in a while, and actually the anniversary is this Thursday. But there was a, and I think I probably mentioned this at Hutchmoot a while back, but there was a moment where I was like, he's sleeping all the time. There's nothing we can really do actively right now. And my studio was right off of the living room where he was resting. And this part gets me. But I was like, my dad knows me as this artist he's cheered on for years, and I can't do anything. So, how about I just take a moment and get back to life that feels normal for a few minutes? And I just sat at my table and I painted, and I worked on this little tiny watercolor painting, and it was the sweet little experience where I felt like if at any moment he opens his eyes and he can see me, like I'm going to be doing what he knows I love and what he's
Mm.
encouraged. And so,
Mm.
yeah.
Man,
And even,
that's
yeah,
strong.
yeah. And I think in a moment like that, someone might, question like, well, shouldn't you have been beside him, or shouldn't you have been taking care of things? And no one was asking that question. It was just kind of like a, well, of course this is what we do, and that's okay. Like any kind of moment of real life that you can bring back into the horrors of a week like
Mm.
that, it's gonna make it a little more okay. Like you need some
Mm.
normalcy. Yeah. So then even after that, there was a, like, I think I painted the picture for his the little program, or the kind of the little memorial paper that they have at the funeral. So we did
Mhm.
that, and it was a painting of a sailboat because he loved sailing when he was a lot younger. And then as time went on, it was just honestly this deep, dark depression that comes with grieving. And I had zero drive to really do anything. And I think I probably tried picking up a sketchbook once in a while. I had an iPad I was trying to learn to paint on, and everything just kind of fizzled out. And I can't remember if there were any books that I turned down during that season, but I feel like there was definitely, like, I had enough cushion to just coast for a bit, and thank the Lord that I did. I mean, God definitely provided because I decided to take the summer off because I'd done a lot of books back to back. Took the summer off. He got sick. I was trying to rest from all those deadlines, and then that happened. So I was able to have my full attention there. And then after that, it was just this, like, okay, what am I doing with my life? We're just
Mm.
gonna eat and sleep and eat and sleep. And that was also just a very sacred time of being with my family and us going through it together,
Mm.
and tons of memories of just how we got through and how our patterns changed. And I do remember there was a day, I want to say it was maybe like 8 months out, where I felt like a little bit of the sunlight was coming back in figuratively. And I got my sketchbook out, and I think I drew kind of a self portrait of with a bunch of it was almost like a cloud of witnesses type of drawing where I had all these
Mm.
faces and they weren't of anyone I knew. It was kind of like a fictional version of me and, actors playing people that I know, different faces. And it was kind of me in a smock with some paintbrushes and stuff. And I just kind of remembered, like, I'm an artist and I'm gonna get through this. And all of these people that are like in this with me, they're all experiencing this and they all love me and we're gonna get through.
Mm.
And then I drew like a picture of a girl comforting a pony in a stable. And I'm not a horse girl, but I was like, this feels like it could be in a chapter book. Maybe I'll do chapter books someday. And then at some point, a friend reached out about a book. It was Catherine Parks. She had written a book called Empowered, which is a series of biographies for, it's about Christian women for girls, middle grade girls. So I got to do some black and white portraits for her chapter book. And that was,
Oh, that's cool.
I think that was the first like kind of serious work that I did getting back into illustrating. So from there, I just kind of clawed my way forward and eventually decided to get my own place and just keep pressing on. And that's, yeah. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
was at the time I was living with my family.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I think that's the hardest thing for us who have suffered loss is getting back to some type of normalcy. And
Yeah.
but I think about it, I think my dad would not want me to sit in that grief. He would want me to keep pressing,
Hmm.
keep moving forward. And but that is so hard to do. It's hard to take that next step. It's hard to do that, the mundane again, when it's not the same as it was. Um,
Very much so. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. I'm glad that you did. I'm glad you got back out there.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. God keeps providing, He provides just enough light for the next step.
Isn't that the
Yeah.
truth? Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's why I always say his word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path, not a Q beam or a flashlight way off into the distance, right? It's just
Right.
it's kind of shining right at our feet because that's really about all I can handle anyway. So
Honestly, yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't need to see far off. I just need to see what's in front of me there.
Yeah. We need grace for today, and then grace for
Absolutely,
what's tomorrow. We're not there yet.
Mm.
absolutely. Interesting. Sketching is so when it's fun. I mean, I think everybody
Yes.
sketches at some point. However, stick man the shit may be. Uh, but I think everybody loves sketching, and it's a lost. I think it was more common. I think it before a lot of digital technology. I think sketching was a lot more common. I mean, I remember. I think back to like when I was growing up, people always drew on their notebooks. Or their minds wandering in class, and everybody would doodle something, right?
Mm.
Yeah. And
And
even way before that, I was just at the Beatrix Potter exhibit at the Frisk National Art Museum.
Oh, nice.
And as children, Victorian children were expected to draw extensively. And Beatrix Potter and her brother, it sounded like their whole family liked to do art and different types of drawing and painting and crafts and whatnot. But it was also a very common thing for Victorian children to be taught how to draw. So
well,
lots
that
of people there for a while, like that's what you did.
yeah, well, that's kind of what I was leading to. When you see, like, we call this a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark,
Mhm.
right?
Ooh, I like that.
Well, even Lewis and Clark in their in their journals and their travels across America, they would illustrate or they would draw or they would try to remember, like, this is what this species of tree that I've never seen looks like. And so they're
Uh,
trying to render, it down because they didn't have a camera, right? I don't have a camera to capture this. So everybody sort of drew, and historically, I think everyone has taken moments to capture things with sketching as sort of I think it is a lost art. I wish we could
yeah.
encourage it or bring it back. I don't know if it's going to come back because we can't put our iPhones down, but whatever. But
Yeah,
I think about, old journals, people would always have sketches of things that they saw in their journals. And,
definitely. Yeah.
I do that as, they may not be very good, but it's always helps me remember places that I am, especially if it's a scene of
Mhm.
a place that then I want to kind of remember. And so it
Mm.
takes me stopping for a moment and looking, like I said, looking differently.
It does.
You know,
It does. It
I
kind
want
of, it has to hold, you have to be held there for a moment, and then
Mm.
you work through all the
to,
little kind of
yes,
visual problems and figuring out the shapes, and it makes you look closer.
yeah. For me, photography and Brian too, we both love to capture things with our camera, and that was something my dad loved and did, and I
Mm.
inherited his camera, and so kind of took
Oh,
started doing that more, and that makes you slow down. But boy, sitting down to draw something is next level slowing down.
yeah.
Because you really have to look a long time, and you'll draw it and go, "Oh, that's not it," you erase or whatever.
Yeah. Gotta
But
get that
I
eraser.
like the how it makes me slow down. It causes you to stop and look deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this funny kind of silence. It's almost like, oh, I'm not used to that.
Mm.
Yeah,
How
we're
did we
not.
get so far away from this kind of silence and paying attention?
Yeah.
So these places that you draw, I mean, I'm looking over here at one. It's a little. It looks like a fairy could live there. I bought one for my wife, and it's above her desk. And then you got all these little woodland creatures, and you got these beautiful watercolors and these little cottages. I mean, have you been to these places, or do they only exist in your mind? Or I mean,
Mhm.
is this a land that's out there that's only in Breezy's head, and
Where
everybody
is
wants to
it?
go?
Oh, it's a lot of it's a lot of places I've been. It's a lot of places I've read about. It's a lot of places that I've seen in BBC movies that hopefully I will get to be at someday. There's, the classic, The Secret Garden, I think was probably the first movie that I saw as a young kid where I was like, wait, there's that was beautiful and I
Mm,
liked it. What was I want more of that. And then I'm thinking of like reading Anne of Green Gables, and
mm,
so much of that takes place in the outdoors. And she's got, the haunted woods that she runs through, and then there's the Lake of Shining Waters, and they,
Mm.
talk about the flowers that they're arranging or putting in each other's hair and the language of flowers. And when I was young, I liked to get my identification books and put them in a little tiny knapsack. I was always kind of looking for the perfect bag to put my adventure tools in. And I was like, I'm going to become a naturalist, or I'm going to rescue baby raccoons in Louisiana. It's just all kinds of these funny little things. I'm like, someday I'm gonna, or the classic, I'm gonna be a marine biologist when I grew up. So,
that's a field I think all of us wanted to do. My
oh
son wants to
yeah,
be a marine biologist. I'm like, he's
it is
8 years
hard.
old.
I've heard it is so hard to get into that field professionally because so many people loved it growing up.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I thought that was like one of the only jobs available growing up. It's like, oh,
Honestly,
well, you can
though,
either be an astronaut or a marine biologist, and then
honestly, with all those oil spills we were constantly being told about, that was the main thing you did. You grew up
yeah,
and rescued ducks
I'm
from.
gonna get some Dawn dish detergent, and I'm gonna rescue a duck.
Gonna save the world.
That is, this is how we do it. What else would you want to do with your life?
It's funny that the church that I serve at, I live in Mobile, so I live down here on the Gulf Coast and on Mobile
Mm,
Bay. And University of South Alabama is here in Mobile, and we have the Dolphin Island Sea Lab that's connected to the university. So there are a couple of folks that attend my church that actually are marine biologists, and they work at the Sea
ooh,
Lab.
oh my
Living
goodness.
the
And
dream.
they're living the dream, man. They're living the
That
dream.
is. You should hook us up.
Counting
And
fish.
there needs to be like a special episode.
We need this episode brought to you by Dawn dishwashing detergent.
We've actually had a couple of marine biologists. Matt Lewis. Matt
Yep,
Lewis has been on the show. He's a
yep,
biologist,
Hmm,
and Hank. That's
yep,
what Hank does up in North
yep.
Alabama.
That's true. We have.
Pretty cool.
and yeah, that's the job. That's the dream job right there.
It is marine biologist.
So
What?
Breezy, oh, go ahead, Brad. Go ahead.
I think we're on the same page. I think we love. I love sitting around a good fire. There's nothing like a good fire, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so we call this a little digital campfire, if you will, this podcast. We're on Zoom, but imagine yourself sitting around a warm campfire and
Mm,
everyone's faces kind of glimmering and glowing from the light of the fire, and it's real dark behind them. And we're all leaned in listening to stories. And your turn is next, Breezy. What would be like one of your favorite fun stories, or maybe a scary story, or maybe you
mhm.
nearly died story? I love a good close call story
Yeah.
personally, but any kind of fun story that you would love to tell around this here campfire.
Fun stories. Let's see. There's little smatterings of fun little adventures that I've been on. There have been, I think one of the funnest things that I used to do in the great outdoors was I was part of a church for a few years, and every fall they had a camping trip. And it was like almost everyone showed up. Everyone somehow made it, and even if it was just for one night. And so it was this nice little park way out in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. And it wasn't just flat, like it was an actually interesting piece of land with some woods, and it had a quarry, and there were some like little trails. So we'd pretend that we were exploring caves, and there wasn't enough to really get lost in, but enough to create a little bit of, spookiness and conflict amongst the big kids and the little kids. And there were also canoes, and there was a river, and there were so many times we would be on the river, and there'd be groups of us, and all kinds of like joking and goofing off, and these little tweens flirting with each other, trying to figure out life and who they liked and how the evening was going to go. And there was also like a chili cook off. All the dads would have their special recipe of chili that they
Epic.
would make, and then we'd have soccer games. Playing soccer in the dewy grass was always super fun. I never like played seriously, obviously, but you got to be involved a little bit. You figure it out a little bit. It's just that community feeling of like getting to do hands-on stuff with your church family, and you're at that age where everything is so new and exciting, and there's all kinds of drama going on, and you've got, babies crying, and mom's trying to keep everyone in line, and then um everything's sweaty and everyone's wet and tired, and you finally get to the end of the day and you're in some dry clothes, and the pastor, one of the elders, leads up a prayer for the evening. You have a hot bowl of chili, and the best part the best part I always loved was the singing and the dessert. And so I was in a
Mm.
tradition where they only sang psalms, but they were set to a lot of traditional hymn melodies, and a lot of the people in this church knew harmonies, and so the singing was beautiful. And then we would have these we would like bake the dough on the ends of sticks, and some
Oh,
people
I've
had those little
recently
like,
seen that. I've just recently seen that. How did I
right, I
not
just
know
saw a video.
this?
It unlocked all these memories. I was like, "Wait, we used to do that all the time." Oh, it was so great. So you could just,
Now I'm
yeah,
hungry. Now I'm
wrap dough
hungry.
on the ends, cook it, and then fill it with pie filling,
Oh
and then
my
chase each other in
goodness.
the dark until it was time to go to bed. And then,
What a great
you
memory.
know,
Wow.
get in your damp tent and wake up in the morning, and you could hear the little birds and the early morning light starting to glow, and it's kind of quiet, and then the craziness would start all over
Let's
again.
do it all over again.
Ah, yeah.
Mm.
There was one
Wow.
year we were down by the river, and we were climbing the trees because they would arch over the river. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but apparently there's something called poison oak.
Mm.
And climbing those trees is how I got introduced to poison oak. But
Oh no, that's not good.
Yeah,
oh, it's
that is
all up
not
the
a
back.
subtle introduction either.
No, and I slid down that tree more than once.
Mm.
It was
Gosh. Oh, I'm
Mm.
itching just thinking about it. Mm.
Yep.
it was the worst. But yeah, those are some really sweet memories. I'm like,
Bet you didn't do that again.
oh no, that was the only year. Only time that happened. And then I told all the little kids every year after that, don't do what I did.
Don't do what I did.
Please, I'm trying to save you pain, woe, and sorrow.
So much
Oh.
sorrow.
Well, I have to ask, do you have a favorite tree?
Oh my gosh, yes.
To
What are,
draw or just to draw? Like what
yeah,
kind?
I'll take any answer. Yeah.
Both.
Like,
I
okay,
love
let's go with
fall.
one that you like to draw and one that you
Okay.
like to just admire.
Ooh. Um, oh geez. Okay. So honestly, I love I love drawing and looking at white oaks.
Hmm.
They are just the best. I have mixed feelings about bur oaks because the acorns, like, they've always been a part of my childhood, but they're also kind of weird. But just general white oaks are
I can say
phenomenal.
that
They're
about a lot of things. It was part of my childhood, but it was kind of weird.
It's kind of weird.
yes.
Sort of weird.
The thing was kind of cool. The other thing, not so much. Yeah. And I think too, what was disappointing about the bur oaks is like they look cool. They make the caps make really great hats for little dolls. I used to sew these little tiny dolls and you put a little acorn
Yeah.
hat on them.
Yep.
By the time you'd find the bur oak caps, all the little frilly bits were always smooshed off or like walked over, and you just couldn't find a pretty one.
Yeah.
And then at that point, they were just extra weird. But yeah, drawing white oak leaves is one of my favorite things.
Mm.
And looking at them, I'd love to, like, if I ever own land at some point, I hope there's a good white oak tree on the property. Or I could
Always,
plant some. I could plant
say you
trees
could
for
always
future
plant them.
generations.
Yeah.
Right.
We were looking at planting some oak trees on our hunting land, and I was like, oh well, it's got to be white oak, right? I mean, you want to plant some white oak. They
Absolutely.
don't grow. They don't drop their first acorns until like 30 or 40 years.
Oh,
And so
what?
it's
Planting
like,
trees for your son to enjoy.
yeah, here you go, Charles. Here's a tree.
Oh, that's fantastic. I had no idea.
So which one do you like to draw? The white oaks, and then you like the I guess white oak is it hit both categories?
Yeah, I like drawing and looking at admiring white oaks. And then I think bur oak is a type of white oak. And then they're fun. Okay, what I like about bur oaks though is that they tend to be some of the tallest trees in the forest, at least around here. Um, there was a clump of woods behind the house I grew up in, and it was just far off enough to where I don't know, you got a good view of what all the trees were doing throughout the season.
Mm.
And there was this, I liked how singular bur oaks, they just stretch their arms out just straight. But when they're in a group, they're very impacted by their surroundings. So they just, their arms kind of do this
Hmm.
instead. And they just take on a almost completely different personality based on who they're standing next to.
That's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, there was like a sycamore right next to a bur oak, and they both just kind of went, what? And they were like sisters. They were like, I don't say twin sisters, but they were like, the sister with blonde hair and the sister with brunette hair, and they were doing different things, but they were like kind of accommodating each other, but they were there. They were friends. They were next to each other. And
How about that?
yeah, but off, way off where, the neighbor farmer's land was, a smattering of lonely bur oaks, and they were all formal. They looked like introverts. They were just kind of, I don't know, they were perfectly shaped. They had their act together, but they weren't as interesting as the ones in the woods.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't
Brian,
know. I think,
what about you, Brian?
man, I'm probably I got two.
yeah, what about you? Yeah.
I love a live oak. They a
Oh,
Spanish moss hanging
mm.
off of a live oak that just
Dang,
is
you took
just
mine.
well, I knew it. I had to get it first because you live in Mobile, but no, I do love that because it reminds me of home. My
Mm,
parents grew up in South Alabama, and my mom and sister still live there, and just that just seems like home, man. And but also, I love a willow tree. Um,
mm,
I mean, just a lot of good memories of willow trees beside ponds that I would fish in growing up, and um, just the way that they just when they're done right. I mean, they just can get enormous and just drape over it, just so flowy. I don't know. They're just really
Yeah.
beautiful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. How about you, Brad?
Since you took mine, no. I, I vacillate between the two here in Mobile. I love a beautiful cypress tree
Oh
because of
yeah.
I've been spending a lot more time on the water in my boat.
Ooh.
And so you see those cypress knees sticking out of the water and cypress trees. And they also will have a collection of moss usually in those. And they're beautiful trees here in the South and on the water. But recently, I've had the opportunity to, a couple of years, go out to Wyoming. And the one place that I've visited twice now, there's a massive ponderosa pine
Hmm.
that just stands up like a massive sentinel on the side of this hill, and
Mm.
it is so beautiful to me. And we don't have those kind of trees here in the South. We have longleaf or loblolly, but they don't grow quite like a ponderosa pine does out in Wyoming. And man, all by itself. It's just incredible looking, and it's on the side of this mountain where there are rocks. I'm like, this thing's tough
That's
because those
amazing.
roots are holding on to to rocks, and man, it's really cool. So yeah, it's probably my favorite now.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All right, Breezy. The last question we like to ask our guests is, what is your next adventure?
Oh, my next adventure.
That you may be in the middle of it right now with this
I might be in
sabbatical.
the middle of it. So yeah, I guess I'll talk about what's kind of currently happening is I'm on a sabbatical. I had not taken a summer off. I could take pockets of time off, but I hadn't really taken a honest vacation in a long time. And then I got the bug to come down to Franklin and Nashville, Tennessee. And so it's like God was really impressing on my heart that he wanted to show me how he'd provide for me and just to take some time to rest and do a
Mm.
massive reset. So I honestly, I was feeling a lot of burnout, debated bringing my art supplies. I'm glad I did. Um, Starting to feel the creativity trickle back a little bit.
Mm.
And yeah, so I've been just exploring the area. I've loved driving around these rolling hills and on the winding roads, and especially at golden hour. I mean, Indiana is pretty flat and it can be very, very beautiful. Like, no doubt. I kind of love that it's flat. Um, but man, driving on non-straight roads, there's just something about it, man. It's a little exciting. I'm like, ooh, gotta pay attention. And the sun hits the hills just at a certain angle at a certain time of day, and everything just
Mm.
glows. And you get these. What I really love about golden hour and just past that is when the shadows start to deepen and there's almost this like amethyst quality to it. The
Mm.
shadows are kind of blue, but when they're so deep, they're almost violet and they almost vibrate. They're so rich. So getting more textures of that at different times of day, I'm like, this is beautiful. So it's been very restorative. I love it. I
How
would
long are
love to
you
live
gonna
down here
get to stay
sometime.
down in Franklin?
I've definitely for one more month. It might be a little bit longer, and someday I'd love to live down here. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
it's
you're
very
about to hit
exciting.
the prime time, Franklin. I mean,
Yes.
the leaves are about to explode probably in about a month, and
Exciting.
you'll want to live down here forever when you see that.
Oh no! Don't twist my arm. Oh man, yeah, I would really love to see that. I want to see if I can, yeah, get that in for sure.
Mm.
That'd be gorgeous.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Breezy. This has been
Yes.
fantastic. Very lovely to get to talk to you.
Oh,
We've
same.
we've talked a lot over the last several years, but this has been really great. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, I've really felt like I got to sit around a campfire with you guys. This was really fun.
Yes.
Well, Brad will put some crackling of the wood in the
Ooh,
Yeah,
background,
I got a
and
little background. We'll just make it seem like we're actually sitting around one. That'd be lovely. It's
perfect.
almost campfire season too, man. It's starting to be a little cooler in the
yeah,
evening. Even in Mobile, it's
Yeah.
like 60, 61 tonight, I think is our low. So I'm
we're getting
looking
there.
f- looking forward to a little break in the heat because it's been a whopper of a summer down here in Mobile.
Oh, I bet.
But man, thank
Summer.
you so much for coming on
Oh,
and
thanks for having me.
sharing your time with us and sharing some of your story with us. Yeah, man, I hope, I'm going to continue to sow those seeds of creativity for my daughter, and maybe she'll
Yes.
be an illustrator one day. She has all the makings of an illustrator. So
Yes. Supportive
trying to,
parents go a long, long way.
yeah, just trying to cultivate that in her life. But thank you for sharing
Oh,
all of that. And
good. Absolutely.
may we all get a pencil and paper and sit down and sketch a little something, more. I hope
Yes.
this encourages people to do that. That our journals would have pictures and words, not just pictures. But there's
Amen.
something about it. But I want to do better at doing that. Every
Mhm.
now and then I'll be inspired to draw, but now I just need to be better at that. But thanks for inspiring us, and thanks for your art and sharing that with us. We hope, like Brian said, we're trying to kind of interject some goodness into the world, not
Yeah.
contention, but just some encouragement and some inspiration and some goodness for people to slow down, to look deeper into the world around them, and to
Mm,
maybe draw something or write something or tell a story. Maybe
yeah.
sit around more campfires and share more stories like this, so the world would be a better place, I think, if we did more of that, right?
Absolutely.
We hope this podcast encourages people to do that, to write their own stories, to share their own adventures in the place we love to call the storied outdoors.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. We hope these stories encourage you to write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.